Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Today in Space. As always, I am your space science podcast host from the East Coast, Alex G. Orfanos. And this week, I'm sharing more about my latest projects and my experience using space-based internet for the last few months. I'll talk about 3D printing and the maker mindset and how I think differently about failure now than maybe some classical aerospace engineers might, especially differently than when I was just a young aerospace engineer in college. It's been a busy month so far for me, and I've been doing a lot of traveling from South Carolina to Texas this week. I'm excited to hang out with a bunch of friends, marketers, business people, and play some very intense trading card games, so I'm pumped. But before we get started, let's do a quick round of space reminders. Number one, Starship is getting close to its next test launch. That will be Starship V3. SLS and Orion should be moving out to the pad by the end of the month to get ready for April's launch date of Artemis 2. In the meantime, make sure to go check out Project Hail Mary in theaters now if you're looking for some more space. And it's not an ad, although it would be great if it was, but it's just an amazing book, and I've only heard great things from the fans who've gone to see it. I won't be able to see it until I get back from Texas, but the plan is to go check it out. So if you see it, let me know what you think. Don't forget to follow us on all social media. In any place that you follow us online, go to the link in our bio or in our account. It's going to be stan.store/AG3D Labs. That's where you're going to be able to find everything, every social media that we have, from Today in Space to AG3D, and you're going to be able to see everything that we're doing there if you want to follow along. And of course, if you're listening to the podcast, make sure to follow us, subscribe, share with other space curious people, and if you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell so you get every reminder, and like and share. Now, let's dive into my latest project with the Starlink 3D printed deck mount. If you've been following us online, you've been seeing the series that I've been doing, and we've been using Starlink service for a few months now. It's been very good so far. It's essentially what I'm using for Today in Space and AG3D as a business, which gives me plenty of bandwidth for download speeds and enough upload bandwidth for me to stream basically any time. I'm getting roughly 350 to 400 megabytes download speed and about 30 to 50 megabytes for upload speed. So again, for me, if I'm using all of that internet, it's perfect. And using space-based internet, it's ripe with content possibilities, especially for a space science podcast. And we even 3D printed our mount for the deck, which has helped us make a long-term series for the Part Detective to show what's possible with 3D printed parts in real-world applications, which, after all, is what I've been doing as a day job for the last decade. But before we talk about the mount itself and the maker mindset, I have a few thoughts on using Starlink for the last few months. Space internet has been very good. It seems to have a distinct advantage over what is considered basic internet here on Earth. Your download speeds are incredible, right? 400 megabytes per second, at least the version that I'm using. My upload speeds are what you need to stream anywhere here on Earth, right? With, as long as you have an open sky and clear view of the satellites going overhead, the only thing that's going to beat that is high-end fiber optic internet with a high-end router. But otherwise, it's really good and still less expensive. And with Starlink, you seem to be getting a very rugged system, right? The power pack, all the cords have gaskets, and they deploy these out in disaster areas, right? Floods, earthquakes, whatever the case is. I had this outside in the rain, pretty much. The router, the cables, and the power pack, I had them outside and they were okay because they built them ruggedly, which is awesome. And the cables themselves are definitely higher end than probably what most people are still using, old Ethernet cables from what they had from their last router. And the routers that you get from basic internet are real sluggish. So the whole system of Starlink, you're getting a lot of upgraded hardware, which if you get the right deal, you're not even paying for that up front. Would I recommend it? Yes. But if you do not have a way to mount the dish, like you live in an apartment building and you can't, you're on the third floor, you can't put a dish outside your your window, or if you're in a really wooded area, right, you can't get a dish high enough through the trees, then maybe it's not for you, right? If you don't have clear skies, then Starlink's not going to be good for you. But it is an amazing idea to think that these can go anywhere on Earth, right? And it allows people who live in places that are too far from cities, don't have landlines, right? They don't have fiber optic internet. They can have great internet. They don't even need to live in a country with the infrastructure in order to have it. And we've seen that as it's been deployed around the world in places like Ukraine and other places. You just need to have, in my case, 120-volt power and basically the ability to keep 30 to 80 watts going to this, which really, at the end of the day, is not that much power. And while space internet is controversial in its effect on Earth-based astronomy, it is one of the great use cases for the space economy that I've seen in my lifetime so far. Aside from GPS, obviously. It's a real modern day case where something from space can influence the lives of humans back on Earth in a positive way. But that's enough about Starlink because this is not an ad. Let's go back to the 3D printed deck mount. My first design was 3D printed in PETG or PETG, which is a good material for outdoor use. Right? Essentially, it's the same plastic that you have in those disposable plastic water bottles. The design I made provides plenty of strength for the dish to be held up and hold up through any kind of wind. But the conventional thought would have been that it's just not good enough to make this and use it outdoors. So you probably shouldn't do it, especially when you consider the fact that we had a once in a generation blizzard hit here in New England. That adds to what most people would say, which is, I wouldn't even try that. But it really held up well in the extreme cold, snow, rain, ice, winds. It surprised me a few times. And even recently, we just had 65-mile-an-hour wind gusts just the other night, and it survived. And this past week, I upgraded the stand so that my dish could sit a little bit higher and not lean against the deck like it was before. When I designed the deck mount originally, Starlink and its pipe fit adapter sits in the post for the actual deck mount. And, I designed it so that it could print on a basic 3D printer, right? So that down the road, if someone wanted to buy this or download the model and make it themselves, they'd be able to make it on there. So when I designed it, I didn't necessarily account for the fact that this mount was going to have not enough lift on it. So we made an adapter. But that's iterative design, right? That's prototyping. And that's what 3D printing is so good at. And that's why it's a fun one, because my first prototype had a mistake on my end, which made for a great lesson in iterative design and the maker way, which we'll talk about later in this episode. I've been posting the series of videos online so that you can check them out more in depth. So make sure that you're following us everywhere on social. Hit the link that's in our bio. You can find everything over there, but also make sure to go check us out at AG3D Printing over on YouTube. Personally, I've been loving all the feedback and the conversations I'm having with folks about it. One of the things that is tough about working in any technology field, especially 3D printing, aerospace, engineering, is that you can't really talk about what you're doing, especially not online. So Today in Space and AG3D and the Part Detective have been my way of showcasing those projects that are not only fun and interesting, but I can actually talk about and make content around. I spent essentially the last decade doing some amazing work in the metal 3D printing world, but most of the stuff I couldn't talk about while I was an employee. And now I'm starting to tell my own stories and make my own parts and projects so that I can share more about what's possible with 3D printing. And I truly believe it's a powerful technology that has incredible potential. But that potential can only be found as people learn what's possible with it, right? So if all of those great use cases and projects never see the light of day because they're stuck behind intellectual property or non-disclosure agreements, then we are limited in how far 3D printing will change the world because people just don't know enough examples of seeing it work. But if myself and others can share more examples of parts and applications in 3D printing, no matter how simple or complex they are, then more people are going to have a bank of what's possible in their brains. And then one day they'll be able to ask, what can I do with 3D printing? You never know what one 3D printed part can do to change the life of a single person, a family, a community, or even all of humanity. If you're interested in following along on my 3D printing adventures, then I highly suggest you follow us at todayinspace.substack.com. Subscribe for free or get insider paid access for my 3D printing lab and stay up to date on what I'm building. We've got a book on 3D printing and an AI 3D printing assistant in the works, and before the summer, they should both be out, which is exciting, but it also means I'm very busy. So don't miss it and stay in touch by following or subscribing at todayinspace.substack.com or go to ag3d-printing.com and sign up for our newsletter. Now let's talk about the maker mindset, because this really came to mind this week as I posted a video where that 3D printed deck mount went wrong. And I actually just talked about the failure and what failure means. And we talked a lot about the maker mentality in the last episode, where we covered the latest NASA Artemis program remix, which if you haven't, go check that out. It's going to be very important for the rest of this year and moving forward, as it changes not a ton about what NASA is doing with Artemis, right? Artemis 2 is still happening, but it sets up the groundwork for a brand new Artemis 3, pushing Artemis 4, the moon landing, ahead. And this idea of iterative development, where you fail quickly and rapidly in order to learn at an accelerated rate to develop something. This is something that I have been obsessed with for a while, but is still difficult, especially in the aerospace fields. You know, it works for 3D printing and prototypes and design, and it also works for rockets. And we saw that with SpaceX with their Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon spacecraft. The Falcon 9, which is now the workhorse of the entire space industry on Earth, right? It's outpacing not only the entire US launch market, but the rest of the world's market. They launch the most things into orbit every single year now by a large margin. And the Crew Dragon is the NASA human-rated vehicle to bring NASA astronauts to space, especially to the International Space Station, but even for private missions that are available like Polaris Dawn or Fram 2, where wealthy individuals are able to purchase missions and in most cases actually also flying on them, like Jared Isaacman, who is now the new NASA administrator. And unfortunately, NASA's SLS rocket and Orion spacecraft are not iteratively developed in the same maker mindset. SLS takes 3 years to launch, which means they're only still flying SLS for the second time with Artemis 2. And the same can be said of Orion, having only flown on Artemis 1 and a robotic test mission 12 years ago, making Artemis 2 Orion's third flight when it carries the 3 brave astronauts to the moon and back. The main distinction between these two approaches is something that I've struggled with in my career as an engineer. The SLS and Orion approaches of launching and testing rockets over time with the highest levels of safety and lowest launch cadence was what the industry taught my era of aerospace engineers. Little did I know in my early 20s, the angst that I felt with being a classical aerospace engineer was less about my abilities as an engineer and more about the style of developing technologies and spacecraft. And while I continue to have aha moments that remind me of the same truth over and over again, I think it's important to say here as well that I'm a maker at heart. I don't look at failure the same way as a classical aerospace engineer. To me, the classical approach doesn't really allow for failure, even in the development phase. You need to be accountable for every theoretical possibility and build in systems to account for them. But you really only get one shot at proving that you were right. You build the different systems, you run your simulations, and then you bring everything together for the big test and have to hope that everything goes well. And unfortunately, they almost never do. And I would much rather learn along the way instead of assuming that I have a full grasp of reality when all these systems come together. Now, I want to have tested them many times before the big show. To me, the classical approach sees any tests before the big show as a failure. Like, Don't let them see it because they'll lose faith in you before you have a chance to prove yourself. And I get that. That comes from a long history of NASA funding and contractor funding not being secured or guaranteed. And I didn't realize it at the time as a young engineer, but that approach is actually insecurity. It seems like the brilliant engineer thing to do, like trust in me, I'm brilliant. I know physics and I know rockets and we're in a contractor that's done this for many many years, so you should trust us and believe us when we say, oh, it took longer than we thought, so give us more money. But it actually just lacks humility and requires expensive testing that doesn't allow for multiple attempts before the big show. And don't get me wrong, it's not like SpaceX or the Maker approach is without its flaws. You can still run a lot of cheaper tests and still not get anywhere. But at least it gives you a chance to figure out reality before the big test of all systems go. As we found out in some reporting recently, SpaceX almost went out of business many times in their rise to the top. Even legends like Tom Mueller, who was developing the rocket engine technology for SpaceX, didn't know how close SpaceX was to falling apart. Which, for someone building something as complex as that, probably makes sense you wouldn't tell that person because we need them focused on making sure the engine, the thing that brings things into space, works. So while I have hit the classic aerospace engineering approach pretty hard this month with last episode and this episode, at the end of the day, my point is that you should find your approach and style when you build things. There's no perfect or right way to do anything. You can take any approach, and at the end of the day, you just need to deliver. And with space, especially with NASA's program, the reality is you don't have much time to succeed and develop technology. You don't have the luxury that academia and large contractors have with funding, research, or cost plus contracts. The presidency in the US is a 4-year term, and you need to start delivering by year 2 or your funding and your NASA program can get cut. We've been lucky. You got to make sure you're building something that can have a major milestone in 4 years, but you also need to have progress by the midterms, which is 2 years after that presidency. And it's not easy. But then again, NASA was never about things that are easy. So I don't think that's the right way to think about it. So to close out, I still have plenty of hope that the changes at NASA are for a better future in space for all of us, not just the US. There is still plenty to be done, especially to make sure that the brave astronauts that we're sending to the moon and back return to Earth safely. And that's just the beginning, because the Artemis program is setting up a long-term return to space and making sure that humans can not only live on the moon, but we can use that technology to then end up living and working on Mars. So make sure to find your positive, find your method, and keep on building, because there's a lot of work to be done, even if you're not working at NASA on the space program. So thanks for joining us for another episode of Today in Space. And until next time, stay curious, spread love, and spread science. Spaceman Alex, out. See you next time.